Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Luis Báez, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
It's a real pleasure. You're joining us from Sacramento. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about how to inspire employees, build engagement, and drive real results within your organization. Really, really important topic. It's interesting because, as leaders, as managers, I think we always talk about driving results, but the reality is I can't force anyone to do anything. I can try to wield carrot and stick and try to force things on people. And maybe in the short term, I can kind of get away with that. But especially in this day and age in the knowledge economy, if you want long-term sustainable results, if you want collaboration, creativity, innovation, you're just not going to get the results that you want if you're only trying to drive results via carrot and stick, right? And so then how do you do it? And that gets back to really the soft skills of leadership, and trying to inspire people and influence people, and creating an environment where people can motivate themselves and find their own intrinsic motivation to do great things. So this is what we're going to explore and discuss together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Luis's bio with everybody. Luis Báez is a revenue enablement strategist plus sales coach dedicated to serving executives and sales leaders at businesses. In 2017, after years of working in some of the biggest Silicon Valley startups like LinkedIn, Google, Uber, Tesla, and others, Luis began to teach impassioned business owners how to scale their revenues and impact by creating and selling high-end offers. During that time, he was also invited to speak about leadership and personal branding at business schools across the country, including Stanford, UC Berkeley, and Bard. Today, Luis is a published author through the internationally recognized Madecraft organization, which includes an incredibly popular LinkedIn learning course on popularized sales that has been taken by over 20,000 people to date. When it comes to podcasts, he has also brought the beard and baritone to many popular podcasts. There's a lot of other things I could highlight, but I'm going to pause there. Anything you would like to highlight about yourself, your own career, your background, personal context before we dive on into the conversation?
I appreciate that, John. I think the most important thing for folks to know about me as they listen into this conversation is that I am someone who never knew what he was doing and figured it out along the way. And part of it was leading with authenticity and showing up as my whole self and being vulnerable in spaces where that wasn't expected. And so I hope that that is something that everyone walks away with from our conversation today.
Yeah, I really like that. And so important to just be true to yourself, to be authentic. And if you're trying to inspire others, I think it really does start with authenticity. So you have to first be the leader that you want to be for yourself, that you would want others to be for you, right? Like you have to be true to yourself. If I don't like black and white thinking. So like sometimes when we talk about introversion, extroversion, we get far too black and white about it, right? There's a whole spectrum. But I think generally I tend more towards the not the extroverted side. I'm more introverted, introspective. I like to keep to myself more often than not, but it's situational, right? And it depends on who I'm with. It depends on what kind of thing I'm doing. And I like doing stuff like this all day. I could talk to people all day in this kind of a context, or with my students, or whatever, or in a company training or something. And so obviously, it's different for everyone in terms of what they're comfortable with. But I'll tell you what I'm not going to ever do or be as a leader. I'm never going to be that super, extroverted, Tony Robbins type of like inspirational person. Like you can think of like movies and depictions in media, about that charismatic leader. And it's great if that's how they are, but like that's not me. And so if I try to do that, it's just going to fall completely flat. I'm going to be inauthentic. People are going to know that. They're not going to trust me. I'm not going to be able to inspire results. And all I'm going to do is undermine my own credibility and ultimately erode trust. And it's just going to make for a bad situation. So what you said on the outset, I think, is just really, really important as a kind of baseline that yes, absolutely, we need to know ourselves. We need to know there's nothing wrong with trying to grow and trying to stretch ourselves, but know yourself and know your strengths and lean into your strengths and be authentic, right? And I think that's really key.
Yeah, I think that the important thing for me was, as someone who grew up in poverty and is a minority across several categories, I played the game to appease everyone when I stepped into a corporate setting, when I stepped into the
Mm,
sales world, and when I stepped into being an executive. And what I found is that being the good boy, being the team player, following the traditional sort of rules and social norms about how to do business was not only misaligned with who I am, but it actually worked against productivity. Right. It was a matter of, in order to break down walls and to really drive innovation, you've got to be the type of voice and the type of person and the type of energy in the room that says what needs to be said, focusing on what's right and not getting consumed with who's right. Right. And being that person took a bit of adjustment on my end. Right. I had to fall and scrape my knees a few times. But ultimately, I found that being myself and speaking my mind and daring to do so was the turning point in my career. And so I advocate for that. And I also advocate for an environment where leaders take the load off of themselves, of having to do it all, know it all, and really allow other people the opportunity to shine.
yeah, I like that. Oh, because truly, especially in this day and age, of knowledge work, excuse me, of knowledge work, of really specialized expertise. If I'm leading a team, I'm not the expert in everything. I don't know. Like I'm leading a team of people, trying to help bring them together, trying to help them collaborate effectively, creating a good environment, etc. Right? And I'm managing certain things and whatnot. But ultimately, I'm not the expert.
Yeah,
They are. And so I
yeah,
need to trust in them. I need to lean on them. I need to empower them and help them to grow into their expertise and then work together, right? That's my role. I think of if we look at a sports kind of connection here, I think of someone like Phil Jackson.
mm,
The Bulls coach, Lakers coach, won I don't know how many, nine NBA championships.
yeah,
First with Michael Jordan, six of them, and then with Kobe and Shaq in LA. What did he have? Three peats or something like that. I mean, he won just a lot, right? He won a lot
yeah.
of championships. And what was his superpower? It was managing greatness.
Mhm.
His superpower was recognizing when he had amazing talent and then helping to bring them together in a cohesive manner
Yeah.
where they could complement each other. And that I mean, that it may sound easy. You may say, well, if any team had Michael Jordan, they would have been amazing, and to an extent. But guess what?
Mhm.
Michael Jordan played in the NBA for a long time before he ever won a championship. So just having a great player doesn't get you there. You have to
Exactly.
have people that can then work together and tap into the diverse skills and expertise that people have and bring it together, right? And that's something that he was able to do. And he wasn't the expert. He wasn't the Michael Jordan. He wasn't the superstar. He wasn't the Kobe or Shaq, right?
Yeah.
But he was able to create that environment and manage the egos and all of that kind of stuff better perhaps than anyone else. And that's why he had all of that success. And I think maybe it's not a perfect analogy, but I think when we look in business and we look at organizations and successful leaders, I think ultimately the best successful leaders are the ones that are able to really pull out the best of all of their experts, well, and get their own ego out of the way. It's not about them. It's about your people, and it's about helping them shine and pulling the best out of them.
Yeah. I think for myself, a turning point was before I was ever able to be that leader that could develop the intuition and the confidence to lean into that intuition about playing to people's strengths. I needed to transform as an individual first and foremost. And when I
Hmm.
think about what was the experience that really clicked for me, I got my career started in advertising sales in New York City in the 2000s. And so imagine, if you will, this is in the backdrop of Mad Men being popularized on
Mm.
television, and really highlighting the sort of, relationship driven culture of the industry. And as you can imagine, in conference rooms that I stepped into, it was very much a boiler room and had
Mm.
to run the numbers, had to lay down every detail of my sales pipeline. I was grilled and drilled in front of my colleagues, embarrassed, on the spot,
Mm.
on the sales floor. And so I constantly was on guard and I developed this sort of anxiety, right? I became a
Mm.
news junkie. I was on top of all the things. You would never catch me off guard.
Mm.
Fast forward to my transition from New York City to Silicon Valley. I was recruited to work at LinkedIn. It was my first sort of job in the tech industry, and it was an industry that promised this sort of environment and culture that applauded authenticity and celebrated servant leadership
Yeah.
and looked at a very sort of contrast to the experience that I was having on the East Coast. I was excited about it, but I remember my first pipeline review. I had been with the team for a few weeks, called on a bunch of folks, developing my knowledge on product. It was my time to kind of step into the room, demonstrate that I was doing the work, hustling, doing my learning, and putting in my work, right? And I remember that day being buttoned up, ready with my numbers, ready with all the things. And my sales director walks into the room and rather than grilling all of us immediately, she places her laptop on the table, apologizes for being 2 minutes late, projects her laptop on the screen for everyone to see. And it's this beautiful but chaotic color coded calendar that she's
Mm.
sharing with everyone. And she acknowledging sort of the progress that's being made across some things, delays on other requests, and being very human about it. It's like, this is where this
Mm.
project's at. These are the pickup times that I've got for my child. These are the things that I'm also negotiating here and there. I've got the board meeting here, et cetera, right? So the way that she approached it was level setting, right?
Yeah.
First of all, being human, but also level setting that there is this expectation of using all of your resources and leaning into all the things that you have to figure it out. And also to figure it out outside of the confines of the 9 to 5 where it doesn't make sense, right? And
Hmm.
that stayed with me. And as I ascended into sales leadership and as I ascended into being a director of global revenue enablement at a startup, that is the lesson that I carried with me is that I set the tone for how people operate. If I want them to be confident and competent, transparent, if I want them to be intrinsically motivated, I have to also acknowledge that they are humans having a corporate experience. And I have to lean into a bit of my humanity in the way that I show up as well. And that's not to say that I'm a pushover because we drive the
Sure.
numbers. My resume will
Yeah.
tell you all the things. I keep receipts. It's about understanding that there is more than one way to crack an egg. I could be a dictator and on the team, right? That's one style of leadership, but it's certainly not mine. And nor is it productive or necessary.
Well, and that example of your leader that came in and was just genuine with you, and I'm guessing that wasn't how she always started meetings,
No,
like in that case, that was authentic to that circumstance and situation, and it was relevant, and other
yeah,
times she may have been harder nose about um the numbers and whatever, right? And it depends on the
exactly.
situation, right? But
Yeah.
being vulnerable and being open and genuine, it goes a long way in building rapport, in building trust, and just the human side of what we do that I think
Mhm.
is just really, really important. And you don't have it doesn't take a lot, does it?
Not at
It
all.
just it just takes some very in some cases very brief genuine moments with people, to humanize yourself, to demonstrate that you recognize the humanity in them in your team,
Yeah.
right? And then you can move forward, in a more positive way without everyone feeling like everyone's being exploited or that everyone's just a cog in a machine or whatever, all those types of things that sometimes people feel in an
Absolutely.
organization. Maybe you don't feel
Yeah.
valued, you don't feel that you matter or that what all the hard work you're putting in makes a difference. And that's a stinky place to be. You want to contribute and you want to feel like you matter and you want to if you're putting your heart and soul into something to try to drive results, you want it to be acknowledged, right? And so
Yes. And
create
so I
create
think that
oh, go ahead.
no, no, I was just going to say, I think that, the way that you create that sort of environment is, one piece of the formula is how you show up as a leader. I think
Yeah.
the other thing is how it is that you communicate expectation, but then also how you celebrate wins. It's so important that everyone understands which lane they're swimming in.
Mm.
Don't leave the guesswork to them. Be very clear, right? And then also celebrate what it looks like to be doing the job well. Celebrate what it looks like to be a
Yeah.
hero on the team for the customers, etc. When you exemplify things, not only does it give people clearer sort of dimension and structure around how they should invest in themselves and how they should perform, but it also starts to highlight how it is that they can excel. If they understand where the bar is, then they understand how to clear it, and then they can exceed it.
Yeah, and that really is frustrating for a lot of people when they have the motivation, they want to excel, they want to succeed, yet they really don't know how to get there. It's there's no clarity. And of course, there's complexity, there's nuance. We're in a messy world, and so there's never going to be perfect clarity, right? But to be able to have some level of understanding and clarity around what you're striving for, having KPIs and having goals and things that are measurable that you're working towards, and having regular feedback and coaching sessions and things like that. All of this leads to better outcomes, right? And doing it with a touch of humanity so that people know that you care about them. You mentioned servant leadership earlier,
Yeah.
and I'm glad you did because some people think that servant leadership is just this warm, fuzzy kind of nonsense that, you're just a pushover if you practice that kind of a philosophy or a mindset with your people. And I think it couldn't be farther from the truth. I think a true servant leader is not a pushover at all. What they are is they're trying to pull out the best from their people. They get their own ego out of the way, and they're trying to develop their people and provide the support needed to make that happen. And sometimes that means you have to have hard conversations with people. Sometimes that means, sometimes it has the tough love component to it. I think about how I try to raise my kids. I love them to death. I'm serving them daily. I'm trying to help them become the best selves they can become, right? I'm trying to help them grow into productive, happy, thriving adults. That's what I want for people at work. They're not my kids, right? But you get what I'm saying. Like I want my team to thrive. I want individuals on my team to thrive. And sometimes they're not. And sometimes their motivations aren't there. Sometimes their work ethic isn't there. Sometimes they're distracted. Sometimes there's things that need to be addressed. And a servant leader, the difference between like a dictator and a servant leader is the dictator will just come down with the hammer uh, and bludgeon people, while the servant leader will have developed relationships, genuine, authentic relationships with their team, and be able to have those coaching conversations, those developmental conversations to proactively help people grow and develop in real time and address the issues that are present.
Absolutely. I think that there is this idea that, if you're a pushover as the leader, people will take advantage of you, productivity will sink, etc. There are these assumptions that people have about what productivity entails.
Mm,
And I love exploring things that are counterintuitive.
mm,
I love what it be looking at what it looks like to swim upstream, go against the grain, do things differently, and thrive in doing things that way. And so all of the leadership examples that I had throughout my career and throughout my education were all very authoritarian. And
yeah.
I knew that in my gut, the people that I most admired were those folks that were so secure in themselves that they didn't project their egos in terms of,
Yeah. Yeah.
getting people motivated, right? I always admired those people who had gravitism, magnetism. When people want to be around you, that is a sign that there's something about the way that you reciprocate that energy and that effort, and nurture relationships that is stable and sustainable. That's the thing about the authoritarian sort of approach, is that it feels really unstable. It feels like, I'm going to be here one day and gone the next, right? And because I'm not going to be appreciated, because it will come down to a half percentage of whatever my performance is, right? And
Hmm.
so I'm not going to give you my best. I'm not, as a leader, going to get anyone's best, right? And so when I think about productivity, especially coming up in sales, the sort of intuition is that sales is a numbers game. It's very metrics driven, etc. But the thing is that there's this element of energy and intuition in the way that you engage with customers that you can't quite measure.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
if the entire team is in a rut, then your revenues are also in a rut, no matter how powerful your CRM, no matter how beautiful your marketing, right? The energy that your team brings to the relationships ultimately drives the results. And so that's also what I'm cognizant of. Like, what is that secret sauce? That secret sauce is empowering people to show up and teaching them how to lead and teaching them how to be responsible for managing, their own books of business.
There is just so much here. We've only scratched the surface, yet I also note the time, and I'm going to have to let you go here in a few minutes. Before we start to wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, find out more about, your thought leadership in the space and some of the other, podcasts you've been on and writings that you've done and things like that. How can people find those? And then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You can hang out with me on LinkedIn. That's certainly where I spend my time. And if you want to learn more about my work and some of the things that I've produced, you can check out learnfromluis.com, and you can get access to all my programs, podcasts, and everything there. And the thing that I'll leave everyone with is, when you think about what it means, especially this day and age, in the face of AI and all the fears about
Mm.
all the things happening in the economy and politically, et cetera, the more human you can make the experience, the more human you are in the way that you show up, the more grounded the experience will be for everyone else. And that's what we need right now: grounding and stability.
Grounding and stability. I like that. Well said. Luis, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Luis can do for you. Check out his many resources, all the great stuff that he puts out. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.